What's up, everyone? It's Carpo. How you doing today? Well, it's a Monday, sometime in February, and this video is going to be about urban explorers. You know, I'm fascinated with abandoned houses. I'm actually kind of obsessed with abandoned houses. Over the past several years, I haven't really even found any or really put in any effort, but when I was younger, I would say around the time I was 14 years old, maybe a little younger, there was one abandoned house at the end of the street where my aunt and my cousin lived in Estacada, which is in Oregon. It's kind of a little, hick town, if you will, if you want to use that term. It's kind of on the outskirts of the Portland area, right before the woods where everybody goes camping and a lot of people go up shooting and whatnot. And there's this house on the end of the street, and I asked my aunt about it. It was abandoned. It looked overgrown and closed up, and it was a large two-story house with an attic. You could tell it was old. And my aunt said, well, it belonged to a guy named Gary. I won't say his last name because I don't want to expose it on here, but I remember everything about him. He had issues, he had mental problems. Apparently, his family had passed away, and then he passed away, and the house had been abandoned for like 20 or so years. Now, this was in about 1990, I'd say about 1989 or 90. Somewhere between 88 and 90. And I went into this house, okay? I went in with my cousins. We walked around the back door, and I pushed the door open, and there was just one of those little chain locks. You know the ones I'm talking about. The ones where you can open the door part way. And my thought as a 13, 14-year-old was just push on it. And I did, and pushed the door in, and it just kind of pulled right off the thing, and I walked in. Now, this house had been abandoned for at least since the 70s, late 70s, because it was in the early 90s. And everything, it looked like they were in the process of moving. And let me just say, I'm not going to go through the details of all the stuff because I don't really remember in detail. I was too young and stupid. The one thing I do remember, actually, now that I think about it, is that I did take a few things from it, and I probably shouldn't have, because exploring other people's homes, even if they're deceased, you don't want to take things from them. But I'm looking up on the shelf here, and I have this book. I just remembered this was a stamp album. Russia. Okay? It's a thick ass stamp album. And it's not just small, it has a lot of stamps in it. I mean, hundreds of pages of stamps in it. And it goes back to the 1800s. Now, I don't know if these are worth anything, and don't really care at this point, but I was pretty fascinated with the idea that I gotta fix this chair because it's squeaking. I walked in there and I opened up the kitchen drawers. Let me just tell you, it was dusty as hell. It looked half packed up, and like somebody had been in the process of moving or trying to move. But you could tell it had been a long time. And there was a dog skeleton laying right in the middle of the floor. And it wasn't a large dog, but a good size. I don't know what kind of dog it was, but he still had the skin wrapped around him. It was disgusting. It was like a mummified dog. And you knew what had happened instantly. The dog had been left in there after the owner died, and nobody had come back. And because of that, there was food torn open all over the kitchen. The dog did everything he could to try to eat, obviously. And it was, in retrospect, it was kind of heartbreaking. But I was like, well, I'm here. So I found a couple stamp albums, a few other things. I looked in the drawer in the kitchen and found a bunch of old, like, pins from the 70s. One of them was, I Like Ike. There was even ones from, like, the 60s and stuff. It was a lot of old stuff. And I thought about this, and if today I could go back, I've kind of obsessed about that house over the years. Now, I'm going on and on about this house because I want to give you kind of a preamble as to where I'm coming from on this. I used to be a owl pellet collector with my brother, Nick. Now, what I mean by that is we literally drove from barn to barn collecting owl pellets. Do you know what an owl pellet is? A lot of you do, a lot of you don't. An owl pellet is the regurgitated remains of the whole animals that owls eat. They have two stomachs, or perhaps it's one stomach. I think they eat specifically barn owls because they leave a mucous membrane over the pellet that preserves it. So we would go into barns, look for barn owl pellets. So they eat a whole mouse, they regurgitate the hair and the bone, and then digest the meat. These pellets were useful, if a lot of you remember, in kindergarten, which I'm sure a lot of you do. I don't, because they didn't do that back then. But over the recent years, they dissect owl pellets to see what they ate, check out the mouse, try to put the skeletons back together. So we were the ones who collected the pellets and put them in tinfoil and put them up for sale to these companies. It was a damn good business at one time, but a lot of people started doing it. Now, we ran into some interesting people. We got shot at. I would say it was Salt Rock. That was my guess, but now in retrospect, who knows what they were shooting at us? Going into barns without permission can be dangerous. But if you're on a property that's abandoned and no one lives there, and you see a barn in front of you, and you walk up and you look inside and it has 500 pellets and they're worth $1 a piece, fuck yeah, you're going to go in there. So we did. And yeah, we did a few, let's just say less than admirable things, but what we're collecting is owl puke. So to us, justifying this by going into these barns was easy. Anyhow, every barn you go into, especially a lot of the ones that were abandoned for a long time, had some amazing shit in there. And let me tell you, my brother and I saw some amazing antiques. Everything from old cars from the 30s, 20s, all the way up to, Star Wars figurines, entire Star Wars kits, Lego boxes and boxes, things that people had just left behind and never come to get. And the funny thing is, even at that time, my brother and I had enough of a moral compass not to steal. Especially my brother. He's like, I never take from barns. And I thought that was respectable because you want to keep your business respectable, right? And so I'm telling you all this to kind of come full circle on the point that I'm making here. There are a lot of YouTube videos of urban explorers, and I want to say urban explorers. There are some fascinating explorations of amazing mansions, abandoned houses, buildings, facilities, whole theme parks. I think it's great. I love it. But I wanted to kind of touch on one aspect of this that I think is kind of ignored. If you want to call yourself an urban explorer, would it be any different than calling yourself, let's say, a hiker? Now, if you're a hiker in the mountains, for example, and you're hiking up a mountain and you're filming yourself and, yeah, we're climbing up to the top of the mountain, and then you get halfway up and you say, oh, I didn't bring any water. And people are going to be like, wow, this guy's an idiot. He doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. And you go further up the journey and you forgot your tent. That's the kind of thing that would turn people off. They're like, if I'm going to get advice from somebody and watch somebody explore and, in nature, I want to know that they know what they're talking about. I want to make sure they understand some basic concepts about survival and filtration of water, or getting food, whatever it might be, right? And I guess what bothered me was I was watching a lot of these urban explorers and a lot of these 20-something kids or younger who are going into these giant million-dollar mansions and exploring and saying things like, oh, this is looks like a piano, but it's a fucking secretary desk, right? Or trying to pretend like they understand architecture and I'm not here to diss. I'm saying it's great that people go and explore these places. My thought is this: if you're going to get 10 million views on a video, I would expect that you would do more homework than just grabbing your camera and sneaking into some abandoned place to film it. Because if you're going to take the time to explore this place and put everyone else in risk who wants to explore it in the future by trespassing, you would at least understand basic architecture and do a little bit of homework about the place you're exploring. Because a lot of these guys just don't. I mean, they have said the dumbest things. I won't even go into detail, because if either you understand what I'm talking about or you don't. And if you don't, then, check out some of the urban exploration videos. They're pretty awesome. But all I want to say is I know that they're making a hell of a lot of money off of their channels. And a lot of them really have no basic understanding of what anything is that they're looking at. So they'll walk through a house and they'll be like, oh, that's pretty cool, that's this, or that could be this. It's like, look over in the corner. Look over in the corner. You're missing the biggest, awesomest thing in the house, And they don't know what to look for. And I guess I can't blame people because they're young. I'm not saying that, because it's I was a young ignorant dude exploring a house when I was a kid too. I get it. But I want to give a little bit of advice to those out there who are doing these things. Do some research on the place. Do some research on the owner of the house if you can before you go explore. I know how exciting it might be to just run into a house. And I know a lot of these people respect everything. I've seen people open up safes. I mean, finding diamond rings and everything else and putting it back respectfully, contacting the owners supposedly. Nobody knows, because everything, for all we know, a lot of these explorations could just be reality TV. I mean, I'm not saying it is or isn't. I'm just saying the internet has made anything seem like it's realistic. But if you want to be an urban explorer and go out there and search out through, these amazing places through history, I would urge you to do a little bit of research and a little bit of background on architecture, antiques, and basic historical context so you can understand what you're looking at, because you might miss a lot if you don't. And this is constructive criticism. I'm not trying to disrespect anybody. I mean this in all respect. And, I'd like to go out and actually do a lot more exploring in my own life. There are some places that I live in Washington, actually Vancouver, Washington, which is right across the bridge from Oregon. And, there are some amazing, I'm not going to give you the area that I'm thinking of, but in this area there are a lot of farmhouses and abandoned facilities in the Portland area that definitely can be explored. But I've been considering doing something like that, for my channel, which I guess is what kind of inspired me to make this video. So if any of you are really interested in seeing those things, let me know. I think it would be fun. I do what's fun on my channel, to me. So if you want to see me do some explorations, I guess, let me know. But I'm sure most of you would say, of course, yes, because who wouldn't want to see somebody explore some shit instead of sitting in their office talking? But, could do a little combination philosophy tour, right? Anyhow, just wanted to get that out there to all the... Maybe this might reach one of the explorers out there, one of the people I'm talking about. Because I don't call people out for their bullshit. I just say, this is how I feel, and that's what I got. So, thanks for listening. I'll talk to y'all later. Be well. Peace out.